Old age may just be the most magical time to look back on the past. When our hands are no longer strong enough to work, when our feet no longer rush forward as they once did, the mind becomes a slow-motion film, vividly replaying every detail of the years gone by. I have lived through 83 springs on this earth, and within me, the memories remain as clear as if they happened just yesterday. Some as sweet as honey, others bitter as poison. But all of them are part of my life, an inseparable part of who I am.
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
My childhood was hard. Harder than a millstone, that I can guarantee you. We were poor, poorer than church mice. My father, bless him, worked like a condemned man on the farm from dawn till dusk, rain or shine. At home, he was a rough man with his words, you know. Ignorant in a painful way. He'd say whatever came to mind without thinking twice, always believing he was right about everything. My dear mother, may God rest her soul, was a saint. She lived submissively, tending to the house with that distant look, as if always remembering something sad. To help with expenses, she made homemade specialty pies to sell. Nothing fancy, just cornbread, maple walnut cake, and berry cobbler. When she couldn't sell everything, we ate what was left. Even as a little girl, I already had my hands in the dough, helping around the house and looking after my younger siblings. Imagine this. There were 13 of us children counting me. The older ones would find work in Burlington or go to the farms with father. They brought fresh ingredients for mother to make her pies, and for our meals too. The girls helped with cleaning. Everyone had their task except the babies, of course. They just nursed and slept. But you know, no matter how difficult it was, we always found a way to play. Children are like that, finding fun even among the stones on the path. It was during this time that I met Silas. Oh, how time changes things. He was the most handsome boy in the neighborhood, in my opinion. He had such a proud way of walking. We started playing together, and a friendship grew. We became close, almost inseparable. There was something strange about his house, something I only understood much later. We always arranged to play at Willow Creek Meadow. Oh, how wonderful that time was. We played stickball until we were exhausted, played with clay marbles, flew handmade kites. Naomi, Silas's younger sister, also became my best friend. We were like 3 fingers on one hand, always together. My brothers were friends with his brothers. And Jed, my brother, even courted Iris, Silas's sister. Everything seemed so simple back then. Life was hard, but we knew how to celebrate with little. I remember sometimes we barely had enough food at home. But when we got together to play, we forgot everything. The laughter never ended. Our community was small, one of those rural places where everyone knows each other. The school reflected this. Small, with just one large room. Mr. Elijah Montgomery taught all grades at once. What a challenge it was. He stretched himself to attend to students of all ages. He was good, but sometimes it became quite a confusion. The younger ones would sit with blank faces when the teacher talked about complicated math for the older students. Meanwhile, the older ones would get bored when the lesson was easier, whispering and joking around. Poor Mr. Montgomery would sweat profusely trying to keep everyone interested. Some days we'd leave class with our heads spinning, but Mr. Montgomery was a patient man. He struggled and struggled, but in the end, he always managed to teach a little something to each of us. It was from him that I learned to read, write, and do arithmetic, things I've carried throughout my life. You know, back when I was about 10 years old, in the late 1950s, almost everyone in the neighborhood was Catholic, except for 2 or 3 families who were Protestant. They were good, hard-working people. Father Ambrose always said we should respect everyone, regardless of their religion. We went to Sunday worship service without fail. We'd wake up early, wear our best clothes, sometimes pressed the night before with the wood-burning stove iron, and off we'd go to St. Patrick's Catholic Church. Father Ambrose spoke loudly and clearly so everyone could understand. He stood at the altar facing us, performing all those rituals. The women wore dresses, some even covering their heads with an heirloom lace mantilla. The men, even in the heat, wore long pants and starched shirts. I remember the smell of candles and incense that filled the church, the sound of the bell calling us to service. During the week, we prayed the rosary as a family every night. My mother had a small hand-carved wooden family prayer corner at home with an image of the Virgin Mary. There we would light a small candle and say our prayers. During Lent, the prayers seemed endless. The children went to catechism on Saturday mornings to prepare for their first communion. I remember memorizing the Our Father, Hail Mary, and the Creed to be able to make mine. It was such a special day. We also had the church festivals. The Harvest Festival was the biggest, one of the most important and anticipated events in the community. We organized the parish summer festival with fishing booths, food stands, and games. Everyone helped. It was pure joy. Changing the subject, there were times when Silas and Naomi would disappear like smoke. They'd be gone for days, and their older brothers would go to Willow Creek. But there was a painful silence. It was as if a black cloud had passed over their family. Naive as I was, I'd go to their house to call them to play, but I'd always find their mother at the window. From a distance, she'd say in a strange voice, "They're not here. They went to Burlington." Not understanding anything, I'd return home with my tail between my legs. When they reappeared after a few days, I'd be desperate to know what had happened, but they wouldn't say a word. They'd change the subject and then start so many games and so much fun that I'd end up forgetting to ask. But when I was alone at home, I'd keep wondering, what was happening in that house? Why did they disappear like that? Why didn't anyone say anything? It was quite a mystery, you know, and I was curious. But in those days, we didn't stick our noses into other families' business. So I just imagined, creating 1,000 scenarios in my head. The years passed and we grew up together like plants after the rain. It seems like yesterday, but before I knew it, everything had changed. Silas, that skinny boy, had become a strong, hard-working young man. Every blessed day, he would go to Burlington to Mr. Cyrus Whitaker's produce market. At first, it was just to carry boxes, but Silas was too smart. Soon he fell into Mr. Whitaker's good graces, who began teaching him to drive the truck. At that time, he was only 16 years old. Girl, you should have seen Silas's joy when he learned. From then on, he was the one who went to pick up the fruits and vegetables to sell at the market. He'd leave early while it was still dark and return with a full truck. So proud. Sometimes, when I could, I'd stand at the corner just to see him pass by, all important at the wheel of that truck. And me? Well, I turned into a dreamy young lady. I'd imagine what the future would be like, thinking about getting married, having my own home. But don't think it was all dreams. At home, the work was doubled. There were siblings to care for, the house to tidy, clothes to wash. It was from dawn to dusk. Mother liked the dish towels white enough to hurt your eyes. She'd lay them on the grass and soak them in the homemade lye soap she made. The neighbors really liked that soap recipe of hers. It was also good for scrubbing pots until they shone. But you know what? I didn't mind. It was tiring, but there was such pride in seeing everything clean and tidy. The good part was that Mother could work less. Poor thing, she was already tired of making so many pies to sell. With us grown up, there were plenty of children to help. Each one did a little. The younger ones swept the yard. The older ones took care of the garden. I mostly took care of the house, and it wasn't easy. There were so many people to look after that sometimes I thought I'd go crazy. Not to mention the dogs, chickens, ducks. There were quite a few animals there. I remember there were days when I'd be washing clothes in the tub, my hands all wrinkled from scrubbing, and I'd be thinking about Silas. Was he thinking about me too? Oh, how I dreamed. Before I knew it, that childhood friendship was gradually turning into love. You won't believe what happened in our community. It was something so horrible that even the hardest soul in the world would be shaken. You'd better sit down if you're not already seated. Just remembering this makes my legs go weak. Well, I'll tell you. Something very strange happened. Naomi, only 12 years old, became pregnant. At first, no one knew anything, not even her or me, but then the symptoms started, you know how it is. And mind you, the girl had never had a boyfriend, much less a husband. There was all this gossiping in the neighborhood. Everyone whispering, nobody understanding anything. One day, Naomi went to Father Ambrose for guidance, not in confession, but in his office. Poor thing must have had her heart in her hands. When the priest heard what was happening to her, he didn't think twice. With Naomi's permission, he called the police right away. He knew that as a mandatory reporter, he had a duty to protect the child. It was the biggest scandal that little town had ever seen. The police arrived and arrested Declan Calloway in front of everyone. People came out into the street to see what was happening. There were people crying, screaming, fainting. It seemed like the world was ending. And Father Ambrose? Oh, my child. He paid dearly for doing the right thing. The church suspended him from his duties. That means he couldn't celebrate Mass, administer sacraments, nothing. But you know what he did? He preferred to walk away completely rather than keep that horrible secret. He said he couldn't stay silent in the face of such a thing, even if it cost him his job. Look, until then I didn't know anything. But you know how it is in a small town, right? Gossip runs faster than water down a hill. In the blink of an eye, they had told my mother everything. Heavens, when she came to talk to me, she had such a face. God forbid. She came asking very seriously if I went into Silas's house. Not understanding anything, I said no, that we only met at Willow Creek Meadow. I said I was never alone with him. There were always lots of children around. In my naive mind, I thought Mother was insinuating that I was secretly dating. If only I had known. That's when the world collapsed. My mother began to tell a story that chilled me to the bone. She said that their father, Declan, the one who every Sunday was there at Mass, sitting in the first row as if he were a saint. Oh my God, it even gives me a lump in my throat to remember. She said he molested his own children, even Silas. Can you imagine? The worst part is that it wasn't gossip. The priest himself had revealed it to the police in front of everyone, and you know priests don't lie, especially ours who was so correct. My mother told me that Declan drank in secret and took advantage of his children, beat them until they had severe bruises. When I heard that, I was horrified. It seemed like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water over me. Suddenly, everything made sense. That's why sometimes they disappeared, why they didn't go to school, why we could never play at their house. I felt such pity for Naomi, for Silas, For all of them. How could such a thing happen? Dear God, you know, I had never suspected anything. To me, they were just a normal family like so many others. Silas, always so cheerful. Naomi, so sweet. Who would have imagined the hell they lived in at home? I thought about all the times we played together, how they must have been suffering inside, and we didn't even suspect. And that monster got his own daughter pregnant. That night, I cried so much that I soaked my pillow. I kept thinking about my friend Naomi, about Silas. How did they endure all that? And their mother? Did she know? Why didn't she do anything? So many questions in my head, and no answers. For several months, we didn't have Sunday worship service in our town. It was too strange. We missed that Sunday ritual, that community gathering. Only when a substitute priest arrived did things start to return to normal, but it was no longer the same. Father Ambrose was much loved. The neighborhood wanted him back in the parish, but his superiors wouldn't accept it. The church is very strict about sacramental confidentiality. After Silas's father was arrested, it seemed like their family had disappeared from the map. Silas no longer passed by with the truck, and his siblings didn't show their faces anywhere. My brothers and I would go call them, but even seeing movement in the house, no one would come out. It was as if they had erected an invisible wall between them and the rest of the world. One night, late, there was a desperate knock at our door. It was Silas's mother, Tabitha Calloway, with a pale face and wide eyes. She came to ask my mother to go to her house to help with Naomi's labor. She said she couldn't manage alone. My mother left in a hurry, and I, who only wanted to go along, wasn't allowed. The rest of the family stayed in that affliction, imagining 1,000 things. What I'm going to tell you now, my child, is something that still causes bitter pain in my soul to this day. I ended up dozing off there in the living room from so much weariness waiting. I jumped when I heard the door open. The day was already bright. When my mother arrived, it was enough to look at her face to know it wasn't good news. With a choked voice, she said, "We lost Naomi." I felt my blood freeze. Naomi couldn't be gone, but it was true. And what my mother told afterward only made everything worse. When Tabitha, Naomi's mother, came to ask for help, the girl had already been in labor for hours. Tabitha had tried to deliver the baby herself, a stupidity. But seeing that she couldn't manage, she decided to call the closest neighbor, my mother. When the two arrived at the house, they found the brothers over the already lifeless body of Naomi. I almost died from so much sadness hearing that. My mother said that Silas was lying on his sister's chest, crying non-stop. Mother said she spent all night helping to clean Naomi's body for the wake. They couldn't even deliver the baby. That night, I felt that something inside me had died along with my best friend. The cheerful girl I was remained behind, buried with my friend. The world suddenly became darker, colder. And Silas, well, the Silas I knew also died that night. The young man I saw at his sister's wake was another person, with empty eyes and a silence that screamed louder than any word. The entire town was in mourning. That day marked the end of our innocence. From then on, nothing would be the same. Life, which was already hard, showed its cruelest face, and we, still so young, had to learn to deal with a pain that seemed too big to fit inside us. After some time, I don't know if it was a month or two, I went to Willow Creek Meadow, that same place where Naomi, Silas, and I used to play. I sat there remembering the old times. It wasn't long before Silas appeared. When he saw me, he made to turn around, but I went after him. "Silas," I said, "let's talk a little." I told him I was suffering a lot, just like him. Heavens, it was like lighting a fuse. He got so angry. "Are you sure you're suffering like me?" he said, his eyes sparking with anger. And then, my child, it was as if a dam had burst. He began to speak non-stop, pouring out everything that had been stuck in his throat for years. He told me that his father, Declan, had a serious problem with alcohol, but he wasn't one of those drunks everyone knows about. No, it was all hidden, away from the neighbors' eyes. We didn't even suspect. Silas and Naomi had never told me anything. I thought it was shame. But later I understood it was fear, a terrible fear. He kept telling, and I was there listening to everything with my heart in my hands. He said his father beat them, and their mother almost every day, always in parts where the bruises wouldn't show. And the worst part, each night, Declan demanded that one of his children sleep with him. There were 7 siblings in total. When the older ones started growing up, he began to prefer the younger ones. Just remembering this gives me a knot in my stomach. I was there listening to all that and crying like a condemned soul. But Silas wouldn't stop. He said their mother always knew everything and allowed it. Not that she liked it, poor thing. She always got beaten too. The family went to church every Sunday, but the father forbade everyone from confessing the truth. He said he would set the house on fire if anyone opened their mouth. My goodness, I couldn't bear to hear so many bad things anymore. It was as if Declan was the very devil below. How could such a thing happen right under our noses, and we didn't know about it? I felt so stupid, so blind. And at the same time, there was a pain in my chest thinking about everything that Silas, Naomi, and their siblings had gone through. And look what Silas told me. His biggest fear was his father getting out of jail and coming after them for revenge. Oh my, just remembering gives me chills down my spine. He told me with that choked voice, "Gwen, if it wasn't for my little sister getting pregnant, no one would ever have found out what that monster did to us." Naomi was the only brave one who told Father Ambrose all those atrocities. I had never thought about it, you know, but Silas was right. If poor Naomi hadn't gotten pregnant, that hell could have continued for who knows how long. What a situation, my God in heaven. Then Silas began to tell, with tears in his eyes, how the older siblings sometimes tried to confront their father. He said there were times when it even came to blows, but the old man was full of threats. He said such things that even God would doubt, and they knew what that man was capable of. In the end, they gave up confronting him. It was fear, you know, fear of something worse happening. When I heard all this, I couldn't take it. I hugged Silas with all the strength I had in my arms. It seemed like I wanted to protect him from all the evil in the world. We stayed there embracing, crying like 2 penitents. The tears ran hot down our faces, soaking each other's shirts. It was a cry of pain, but also of relief, as if all that stored suffering could finally come out. In the midst of all that crying, Silas sobbed, "I miss Naomi so much, my Gwen. So much that it hurts in here. Oh my goodness, that cut through my heart. Naomi so young, so full of life. What a pity. My God, what a cruel fate for a girl who had barely begun to live." At that moment, I understood the weight that Silas carried. It wasn't just the pain of what he had experienced, but the fear of what could happen, the longing for his sister who was gone, the guilt for not having been able to protect her. It was a suffering too great for a young man to carry alone. It was on that day that I promised myself I would do everything to help Silas overcome that trauma. I didn't know how, But I would try, because love is like that, right? We want to carry some of the other's weight, even without knowing exactly how to do it. You know, one thing that happened after all this, I began to see my father with different eyes. It's true that he had that somewhat gruff way, saying things without thinking. But never, not once, did he look at me or my brothers differently. And his love for my mother was beautiful to see. He came straight home from work, didn't drink a drop of liquor. All this made me see better the man he was. After that day when Silas told me those horrible things, we continued to meet more often. But it was as if there was a silent agreement between us. We didn't touch on that heavy subject anymore. It was as if we wanted to pretend it had never happened. You understand? I think it was a way for us to deal with all that. Silas went back to working at Mr. Whittaker's market. I remember as if it were yesterday. One day he stopped by my house in that old International Harvester pickup of Mr. Whittaker's, honking like crazy. He shouted from outside, "Gwen, let's go for a little ride." I turned redder than a tomato. I looked at my mother, not knowing what to do, and you know what my mother said? "Go on, daughter, enjoy a little." Today, I understand that she did this because she felt a lot of pity for Silas's family. She thought it good that he had some distraction, you know, after everything that happened. I think everyone wanted to see a bit of joy in that family. In fact, it was during this time that my mother and Tabitha, Silas's mother, became closer. It was as if my mother wanted to take care of Tabitha too. We saw her from time to time, always with that sad look. But it seemed that talking with my mother did her good. That day, I ended up accepting Silas's invitation to go for a ride. We drove around town a bit without talking much. The silence between us was comfortable. Just being there side by side already seemed enough. He drove slowly, as if he wanted to make that moment last forever. And me? Well, I was there feeling the wind on my face, thinking about how life could be unpredictable. That's when he spoke with that voice that made my heart race. "Gwen, I'm off work today. Mr. Whittaker let me keep the truck to take you out." I thought that was amazing. A truck just for us. He said he was going to take me to Burlington, and off we went. Arriving at the main square in Burlington, Silas wanted to take me to a diner, but silly me was embarrassed. I hadn't dressed up, you know. We ended up having a maple creamy right there on the square. I decided on the strawberry flavor. On the way back, when we got in the truck, our first kiss happened. My God in heaven, I felt my entire body burn. It was something I can't even explain right. Sensational is too little to describe it. There, at that moment, I thought I had discovered the secret to happiness. After the kiss, he looked into my eyes and said, "You know I love you, don't you, Gwen?" I was stunned because, in fact, he had never told me this before. I didn't know. It was there in that old red International Harvester that we declared ourselves to each other. We made vows of eternal love. We promised never to leave each other. I returned home that day, walking on air. I couldn't stop smiling, remembering the kiss, Silas's words. I stayed awake all night, going over every detail in my head, imagining our future together. The months passed, and that life became our routine. Silas always picked me up to go out. We would go to the diner. It was our little dating spot, you know. We'd sit at the Formica table with a snack and stay there talking, making plans. The good thing about riding in a truck is that we were always getting to know new places, and believe me, that little town always surprised us with places we had never seen before. Meanwhile, One of those days when we returned, I found out that my father had given his blessing for my brother Jed to marry Iris, Silas's sister. Virgin Mary! It was quite a commotion. Everyone knew that Iris was no longer a pure maiden, but you know how it is in a small town, right? Everyone pretended not to know. It was that kind of secret that everyone knows but no one mentions. Looking back now with the eyes of someone who has lived a lot, I wonder what that poor girl must have gone through. At the time, I was too young to really understand. I was just relieved that she hadn't gotten pregnant by that monster of a father of hers. Can you imagine the suffering? Their wedding was simple, but beautiful. Iris was in a little white dress made by my mother. Jed was so proud. He looked like he was going to burst with happiness. I stood watching the two of them and thinking how life takes its turns. I thought, soon it will be me there with my Silas. After the ceremony, when everyone was celebrating, I took Iris to a corner and gave her a tight hug. I didn't say anything, but I think she understood. Sometimes a hug says more than 1,000 words. I saw in her eyes a mixture of relief and gratitude. Now, what happened next was such a great tragedy that it still pains my heart just to remember. There are times when I think it was all a bad nightmare, but it wasn't. It was real and left a mark on everyone. It was a cold dawn, one of those where you wrap yourself all up in the blanket. Suddenly, we heard desperate cries for help. Holy Mary! I jumped out of bed in one leap, my heart almost coming out through my mouth. Everyone woke up. There was all that rushing. We went out into the street still in our nightgowns, barefoot. The neighbors also appeared, all frightened. When I saw it, I thought I would faint right there. It was smoke and fire coming out of Silas's house. It looked like hell on earth. At the time, it came to my mind. It was his father, that monster, coming back for revenge. We later learned that Declan had been released early due to prison overcrowding and insufficient evidence. The authorities had failed to notify the family, leaving them vulnerable to his return. I ran near the house, desperate. I wanted to go in, save everyone, but it wasn't possible. Declan must have waited until they were all asleep before sealing the windows and doors with boards from the outside. The family woke to find themselves trapped as the fire started. My father, may God rest him, went to look at their well and saw that Declan had even covered it with some thick boards, eliminating any escape route. It was a mad rush. Everyone going to get buckets of water from home to try to put out the fire. But it was like throwing water on embers. It hardly helped at all. The fire only increased. And the smoke, Our Lady, it was black, thick, rising to the sky like a cloud of malice. Then my father, a brave man like only he was, saw a door that didn't have boards. He kicked it with all his might and knocked it down. He took a cloth, wet it in water, and put it over his face. When he was about to enter, who comes out of there but Silas, coughing so hard, it seemed like he was going to spit his lungs out. With him came 3 of his brothers, all black from smoke, their eyes red as peppers. I thanked God and the Virgin right then for them being alive. My father asked Cornelius, my brother, to fetch the crowbar from our house to open their well. My father, desperate, asked, "Where are the others?" No sooner had he spoken than Mr. Griffin Walsh, our neighbor, ran into the house. Holy Mary, what a brave man! The smoke was so thick we could barely see him entering. After a short while, Mr. Walsh came out dragging one of Silas's brothers and said, "They're in the bedroom." It was a scene I will never forget. It seemed like death had entered that house and chosen who it would take. My father, Silas's brother, and Silas gathered strength and entered the house. Each came back with the rest of the family. But then, my child, the worst happened. Silas's father, that bad blood, was still conscious in there. When Mr. Walsh went to take him out, the wretch stabbed him in the stomach. Imagine that, the man saving his life, and he does such a thing. It was quite a fight in there. We could only hear the screams and sounds of breaking. After a time that seemed like an eternity, Mr. Walsh managed to knock down Silas's father. The old man had inhaled so much smoke that he ended up passing out. My father and the other neighbors rushed in and got Mr. Walsh out of there. Poor thing, he was bleeding a lot. But he was still alive, thank God. The house, that one had no salvation. The fire consumed everything with Silas's father still in there. And what I'm going to tell you now is the hardest part of that night, when they took Silas's mother out of the house. Poor thing. She was already lifeless, all bruised. You know, Silas's father, that monster, had done terrible damage to her before setting fire to the house. The same thing he did to Mr. Walsh. He did many, many times to Tabitha. It was a scene I will never forget in my life, seeing that poor woman who had already suffered so much in that state. Oh my God, it breaks my heart. We were all in shock, unable to believe what we were seeing. How can a human being be capable of such barbarity against his own family? At that hour, I felt that the world had lost all meaning, not to mention Silas's younger siblings, who saw their father kill their mother right before their eyes. And there was our little town, in mourning again. My child. I would look at Silas, my heart tight, not knowing what to say to console him. What words can ease such pain? The charred body of his father was buried as an indigent. None of them wanted to know anything about the man. Iris, my sister-in-law, poor thing, when she found out what had happened to her mother and the rest of the family, nearly kicked the bucket. It was a stroke of luck she wasn't living there anymore at the time. God is Father, because if she had been there, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. After Tabitha's burial, may God rest her, the situation became even sadder. The entire family without a roof, with only the clothes on their backs. But you know how it is in the country. One helps the other. The land was still theirs, thank God, and that's when the entire town came together to help. I've never seen so many people united, you know. It was a collective effort that would make you cry. Everyone with a tool in hand, cleaning the yard, removing the remains of the old house. There were people who didn't even know the family well, but were there under the hot sun, helping as they could. During this time, the siblings stayed in the church. In a few days, they raised a small wooden house. It wasn't a palace, of course, but it was a roof. Seeing that house emerging was like seeing a flower growing in the middle of asphalt, you know? A sign of hope in the midst of so much sadness. What broke my heart the most was seeing Silas's youngest brother, only 9 years old, all lost in the midst of that confusion. Children shouldn't go through this, right? Sometimes I would imagine what was going through his little head. My mother, saintly woman, was there at their new house every day. She would bring a pot of soup, a cake, whatever she could make. And it wasn't just her. The others too would take turns. One would bring clean clothes. Another would help tidy the house. It was beautiful to see. I remember once, when I went there with my mother. The house still smelled of fresh paint and new wood. Silas was sitting on the porch, staring into nothing. When he saw me, he gave a sad smile. He didn't need to say anything. In those days, I learned that life can be hard, but also that people can be very, very good. I saw people sharing the little they had, working for free, truly caring. It was quite a lesson. It showed that even in the darkest hours, There's always a little light of goodness shining somewhere. At the end of that year, Silas surprised me by saying he wanted to marry me. The problem was that we had nowhere to live. He told me he was talking with Mr. Whittaker about renting that little house behind the market. Actually, it was a storage shed where they kept fruits and vegetables, but Silas said he would fix it up to make a home for us. He asked for the blessing of my father and my mother. It wasn't long before everything was arranged. We got married when I was 17, and he was 19. It was a simple celebration, but full of emotion. I remember as if it were yesterday, me in a little white dress made by my mother, and him all proud in a suit borrowed from my father. My mother outdid herself by making a 3-tiered cake, all covered in icing. It was beautiful. Looked like something out of a magazine. We didn't have a honeymoon, but at that time, it didn't seem important. Our first time together was somewhat strange. Silas, poor thing, didn't feel very comfortable with touching his body. I understood it was because of that trauma from the past. I took it slow. We discovered each other little by little, without rush. At first, he would get all tense, but with time, it seemed like he was forgetting those bad things from the past. After a while, things between us got very good. It was as if we had finally found our rhythm. When you're young, there's no such thing as bad times. We were in love, and that seemed to be enough to overcome any difficulty. Looking back now, I realize how young and naive we were. We thought love would solve everything, that our lives would be like a fairy tale. We didn't know about the challenges that awaited us, the difficulties we would have to face. Then a new phase of our lives began. I started working at Mr. Whittaker's market with Silas, and guess what? I liked it. It was a rush, but I felt important helping customers, arranging the shelves, and best of all, I could be closer to my beloved. Speaking of him, I began to accompany him on early morning trips in the truck. Holy Mary, how tiring it was, but what an adventure! We would leave when the rooster hadn't even crowed yet. I would be all wrapped up in an old shawl from my mother to ward off the pre-dawn cold. Silas would drive, and I would be there by his side, watching the day break through the truck window. It was so beautiful. We stayed in this life for almost a year. Then one day, Mr. Whittaker arrived with a face of few friends. He said he was moving to another town and selling the business. Girl, it was a shock. How were we going to live without that job and without the house? But then a miracle happened. Mr. Whittaker, that man with a good heart, said he was going to give us the old truck. Imagine that. He said we could choose between selling it or keeping it. He said he wanted to help, that he knew we were just starting our lives. The only condition was that we move his belongings to another town. Of course, we accepted immediately. We did Mr. Whittaker's move in the blink of an eye. It seemed like luck was smiling at us, but it was for a short time. Soon another problem came. One of those that makes you lose ground. Our plan was to talk to the new owner of the market, try to continue paying rent for that little house at the back. After all, it was the only home we knew. But when we went to talk to him, it was like having a bucket of cold water thrown on us. The man said he was going to demolish everything. He wanted to build a more modern store, he said. And you know what's worse? He gave us only 20 days to leave. 20 days! How do you find a place to live in 20 days? Silas was walking from one side to the other like a lost cockroach, looking for a solution. That's when he had an idea. One of those ideas that you hear and think, has he hit his head? He looked at me and said, Gwen, what if we lived in the truck? At first, I thought he had lost his mind. How was that going to work? Living in a truck, how could such a thing be? But Silas, all excited, began to explain his plan. "Just think, Gwen," he said. "We take the truck, make some deliveries here and there. We don't need to pay rent, just gas. And I can find work anywhere." At first, I thought it was madness. But the more he talked, the more I got excited. And that's how we decided to leave everything and go live in a truck. It wasn't long before Silas had already arranged 3 or 4 places to go and come back with merchandise. It was something to see. We ate at roadside restaurants, some with mouth-watering food, others not so much. The bath was at gas stations. There were times I took such cold baths that I thought I would turn into a maple creamy. When the body couldn't take it anymore, we would give ourselves the luxury of sleeping in a boarding house. Oh, how good it was to lie in a real bed from time to time. But most of the time, our mattress was the truck seat reclined as much as it could go. And the best part is that we were saving a good nest egg, putting everything in the bank, in savings. We lived this life for a little over 2 years. It was hard, you know. There were days I cried in hiding, missing home, missing my mother. But there was also a lot of joy. We were young, we were together, and each day was a new adventure. If that truck could talk, you wouldn't want to know what it would tell you. I remember once we stopped at a beautiful place full of blooming trees. Silas parked the truck, took my hand, and we sat there watching the sunset. At that moment, even with all the difficulty, I felt like the happiest woman in the world. On that day, I still had no idea, but I was already carrying our first child inside me. That's when everything changed. We rented a small old house to save the money we had gathered with such effort. It was a simple place, but we made an effort to make everything nice. I remember spending hours cleaning, tidying up, dreaming about the future. It wasn't long before our little lady came into the world. We decided to honor my mother-in-law by naming the girl Willa. Ah, what a chubby baby. She was born almost 9 pounds, a ball of love. During pregnancy, I still accompanied Silas on his trips. But after Willa was born, I started staying at home while he continued on the road. It was a good time, full of simple joys. I dedicated myself body and soul to caring for our little daughter. The love I felt was so great that sometimes I thought my chest would explode. The girl nursed beautifully, getting chubbier each day with those plump little legs that made you want to bite them. And when Silas arrived home, oh my, Willa would get all excited. Her little eyes would shine, and she would wiggle all over in her crib as if she wanted to jump into her father's arms. It was a scene that warmed my heart. Look how funny life is. Our little one had barely turned 1 year old, and I was already pregnant again. It seemed like the stork had made a nest at our house. At this time, Silas was all excited about the idea of changing trucks. He would spend hours talking about it, his eyes shining. One day, he arrived home with news. He had found the truck of his dreams. Holy Mary, it was a beauty, big, all shiny. Silas gave that old truck as a down payment and made up the rest with the little money we had saved with so much effort. I felt my heart tighten to see our savings going away. After all, we still had rent to pay. But seeing his joy made up for everything. I trusted my husband. It wasn't long before Silas received a new job offer. It was to make longer trips, delivering cargo to other neighboring towns. On one hand, it was good because he would earn more. On the other hand, oh my God, it meant he would be away from home for longer. When he told me, I felt a shock. Imagine me there, pregnant, taking care of a small child, and now Silas was going to be gone for 2 straight weeks. But what could I do? We needed the money, and he was all excited about the new truck. I swallowed my tears and gave him strength, and so our new routine began. Silas would leave on a Monday, loaded with longing and promises to return soon. I would stay there counting the days on the calendar, taking care of our girl, and feeling the other baby grow in my belly. The 2 weeks seemed never to pass. When he returned, it was a celebration. The little girl would run to his arms. I would cry with joy. But soon, Sunday night would come, and there he would go again, leaving a void the size of the world. When it was getting close to the baby being born, Silas managed to stay home longer. Thank God he didn't miss the birth of Freya, our second little princess. Ah, what a day that was. She came into the world on a beautiful spring morning, healthy as could be. Silas cried like a little boy holding her in his arms. That was a difficult time, you know. I found myself taking care of the little ones practically alone. It was too demanding. Willa was already 4 years old, a smart girl full of energy. I spent the day running after her and her younger sister, changing diapers, making food, cleaning the house. Sometimes when I lay down at night, I felt my whole body aching from so much work. It was at this time that Silas came home one day all excited, saying he had great news. I remember as if it were today. He came through the door with a smile, from ear to ear. He said he was going to rent a large warehouse in Burlington and start his own business. His idea was to hire some friends who already had their own trucks to make the trips. Silas would no longer travel. He would stay in town, taking care of contacts with companies. He explained that he would pay the drivers and keep part of the profit. At the time, I thought it was a great business. I thought to myself, finally, things are going to get better for us. And that's how it happened. Silas rented the warehouse, a large and empty place that soon filled with boxes, papers, and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. He spent all day there, doing accounts, talking with drivers, negotiating freight. He would arrive home late at night, tired but with his eyes shining with excitement. At first it was difficult. Money was short, and we had to make do with the little that came in. I continued taking care of the girls and the house, now with the worry of whether the business was going to work out. Sometimes, lying in bed at night, I would hear Silas muttering, doing accounts, worried if he would have money to pay the drivers at the end of the month. But gradually, things started to improve. The phone rang more. The trucks came and went loaded, and Silas began to relax a little. What truly transformed our business was Silas's innovation with routing. He developed a system to optimize delivery routes that cut fuel costs by nearly 30%. While other trucking companies were struggling with the oil crisis of the 1970s, we were thriving. Each year, we reinvested most profits back into the business, slowly adding more trucks and hiring reliable drivers. By 1975, we had expanded to neighboring states, and by 1980, we had secured contracts with several major manufacturers in the Northeast. He even started bringing little presents home from time to time, a doll for Willa, a new little dress for Freya. Looking back now, I see that change was the beginning of a new phase in our lives. Silas no longer traveled, it's true, but he was also no longer at home. He spent all day in that warehouse, returning late, always with his head full of work problems. But at least he slept with me every night. Well, that's when I had an idea. Put the children in kindergarten and offer to help at the warehouse, answering the phone. At first, Silas turned up his nose. He was jealous, you know. There were only men there, and he thought it wasn't a place for me. But I, clever as I am, quickly arranged for kindergarten close to the warehouse. That way, I would appear there as if by chance and give some ideas here, answer a phone there. Little by little, I infiltrated without him even realizing it. And look at that. Silas began to return home, less tired. But the best was yet to come. There was a large transportation company that Silas dreamed of closing a contract with, but he couldn't manage it in any way. The man who was the owner there didn't even want to talk to us. One day, when Silas went out to deliver some things, I secretly called this transportation company. I asked to speak with the owner, Mr. Beckett Harrington. I said we were a small company, yes, but it was a family business. Then I dropped the question, "Were you born with a silver spoon in your mouth?" The man was a bit awkward. I continued, "If not, you must know that everyone starts from the bottom. If you don't give us a chance, someone will in the future, and you will regret it." The man was silent for a long time. I thought he had hung up on me, but then he said he would think about it. 3 days of agony, you know. I kept that secret. I didn't say anything to Silas for fear he would scold me, say I was meddling too much in his business. On the 3rd day, after taking the girls to kindergarten, I arrived at the warehouse and almost fell backward. Silas was there all excited, hugging me and thanking me. Mr. Harrington, the owner of the transport company, had called saying he was going to close a 1-year contract with us. He said it was because of the proposal I made. At that moment, my child, I saw a different shine in Silas's eyes. It wasn't just gratitude. It was as if he had truly seen me for the first time. We hugged right there in the middle of the warehouse, with everyone watching, and jumped for joy. It was such a beautiful moment that even today, so many years later, I get emotional just remembering. That day changed a lot in our lives. Silas began to see me not just as his wife, but as a true partner. We started making decisions together. He valued my opinion greatly. It was as if a new Gwen had been born, an entrepreneur. Despite our growing success, Silas still carried deep scars from his childhood. There were nights when he would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, haunted by nightmares about his father and Naomi. On particularly bad days, he would withdraw into himself, becoming quiet and distant. I learned to recognize these moments and give him space while letting him know I was there. Over the years, the episodes became less frequent, but they never completely disappeared. Our success in business seemed to help him heal, giving him proof that he had overcome his past, that he was nothing like his father. Look at what happened next. It seems like a lie, you know. Our little business grew and grew like yeast in cake. Soon we became famous throughout the region. That Smarty, clever as he is, began to use our S Corporation business license to buy trucks more cheaply. Then he would hire the drivers. The fleet increased naturally. In the meantime, I got pregnant again, and our little one, Atticus, was born. Holy Mary, what joy! I stayed at home for a while taking care of him. We decided it was time to move out of renting. We bought a small house financed for 30 years. But before Atticus turned 10, we had already paid it all off. It was quite a celebration. And wouldn't you know, things just kept getting better and better. Why, 1985, before we turned 40, we were already considered millionaires. Within 15 years of starting our small trucking business, we had built 5 large transportation companies spread throughout the country. We bought a mansion, you know. I, who grew up sleeping in a cramped room with my siblings, now lived like a lady. The children also had everything. But look, we didn't want to raise spoiled children. Occasionally we would take them to work to learn the value of sweat and money. It was funny to see those children raised in comfort, suddenly having to wake up early to go to the warehouse to see how the business worked. Silas made a point of teaching everything from a very young age. He said our children had to know what hard work is to value what we had achieved. But you know, as much as we had money, I never forgot where I came from. Whenever I could, I helped the family, the old neighbors. I made a point of going to worship service every Sunday to thank God for everything we had achieved. Sometimes, sitting in that huge mansion, I would remember the poor little girl I was, helping my mother make pies to sell. It seemed like it had been in another life. But you know what? As much comfort as we had, what made me happiest was seeing the family united, everyone in good health. That, yes, was true wealth. Look how life takes its turns. After so much hardship, we managed to buy a beautiful house in town for my parents. Holy Mary, what joy to see my father and my mother, already elderly, living in a decent place after so much struggle. It brought tears to my eyes. My brothers, thank God, all got married. Some better, some worse. But they were on their way in life. As for Silas's family, poor things. It seemed they had been born with a black cloud over their heads. Some of his brothers came to work with us. This was even before we got rich, you know. We wanted to help. Give them a chance. But then, my child, something happened that still pains my heart to remember. Thaddeus, Silas's brother, had an accident on the road. It was on a dangerous curve on Route 89, one of those we always told him to be careful about. He didn't return home. Our Lady, what sadness. Thaddeus was so young, full of life. He left 2 small children, a little boy of 4 and a baby girl, not even a year old yet. He was just starting to earn good money working with the trucks, making plans, and suddenly, in the blink of an eye, it all ended. You should have seen Silas at the funeral. It seemed like they had torn a piece of him. He stood there, staring at his brother's coffin without shedding a tear. But I knew my husband. I knew that inside, he was shattered. You know, sometimes I thought that Silas carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. It seemed that his life was marked by pain, one after another. First that suffering childhood, then Naomi, his mother, and now Thaddeus. It was as if fate had chosen exactly that family to suffer. After the accident, we took in Thaddeus's widow and the children. What else could we do? They were family, right? Silas was determined to care for his nephews as if they were his own. I think it was his way of dealing with the guilt, because he felt guilty, you know? He thought that if he hadn't called Thaddeus to work with us, none of this would have happened. My story ends here. A long journey from a poor little girl to a successful woman. But more importantly, a journey of love, courage, and resilience in the face of adversity. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you who have taken the time to listen to my life story today. No matter how difficult life may be, there are always rays of hope. As my family and Silas have shown, with love, unity, and perseverance, we can overcome any challenge, even the deepest wounds from the past. The message I want to leave you with today is simple. Never give up. Believe in yourself, in your loved ones, and in the human capacity to heal. Wounds may leave scars, but those scars can also become the source of our greatest strength. It is a great honor to be invited to the Grandparent's Memories channel to share my story. My heartfelt thanks to the founder of the channel for creating such a wonderful space where memories, lessons, and values from our generation can be passed down to those who come after us. If you enjoyed my story, please consider subscribing to the Grandparent's Memories channel and giving this video a like. Your support helps stories like mine reach more people and become a source of inspiration for many. Next week, the channel will continue to share touching stories from other elderly individuals Stories of love, war, loss, and rebirth. I truly believe you'll find something meaningful in those lived experiences. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next stories on Grandparents' Memories. Farewell, and all the best to you.